Hello, David.
What's up, Laura? I'm excited about this guest today.
Oh, I know. This is awesome. Yeah. Mark Passio. But some say Passio, and I know he'll clear that up. What a great way to start. But oh my gosh. Yeah, he's amazing. I've known him since 2011, and we have done events that they put on in Philadelphia, where him and a bunch of good friends and researchers have just formed this great like alliance and put on events almost every year since 2011 called Free Your Mind Conference. And he's definitely like one of my favorite lecturers of all time. He really hits it home and has had some, really interesting experiences and a very interesting background. And of course I'll read his bio, but yeah, it's great to have him with us.
You know, what intrigues me about this guest is how does someone go from being a Catholic or raised in that, indoctrinated into the Catholic Church or Christianity for that matter, and then rebel and go into LaVeyan Satanism and start studying or I guess you would say the Luciferian doctrine. That's what intrigues me about this. And then that he spends so many years in that and then comes out to talk about it, almost like he admits that he was in that cult. And I guess you could say brainwashed. I'd like to get to the bottom of this and see what his thought pattern was during that time when he was doing that. So that's what intrigues me the most about this guest, is just to get into his psyche and figure out what the hell was going on. Like what compelled you to follow the LaVeyan Satanism?
Yes, Leviathan Satanism. What's interesting though is it gives a person a perspective on a lot about our galactic history, a lot of insight into the occult and things that we don't really hear about. And it's almost part of the integration process, integrating polarity, to have some of those experiences with the shadow side. And for him, it happened to be this, but for others, it might be, something else. And then to come out of it and to embrace, a sovereign connection with one's concept of creator. It's going to be interesting to hear what he has to say about what these forces even mean, because they don't just go away when you walk away from, the church. It's still something that we all contend with, whether we repress it, whether we misunderstand it, whether we distort it, or whether we consciously work with it so that it doesn't present itself as a misuse of power in the world. It's just very interesting, the healing process connected to going into the dark. And so and here we have the name of our show, Dark to Light.
Yeah, that's the whole objective of the show, is to shine the light on the darkness. And, I really love to, I don't know if it's to dig into their psyche and see the inner workings of what's going on, And you corrected me earlier. Is it LaVeyan or LaVeyan Satanism?
Well, there's Leviathan, I think. Leviathan.
Okay, because I don't want to mess that up, but he'll know what I'm talking about if I say LaVeyan.
I think he's going to come on and correct a few things right away, but it's just such an honor and pleasure to have him here. I mean, man, he fills a room, and the energy at his lectures. I've been able to see him live a few times. We'll ask him about and talk about some of the things that he presents about, natural law and just really like acknowledgement of the earth. And I mean, these are just really like crazy times, and it's getting weirder. It'd be interesting to see his perspective on this particular timeline, because this church and dark technologies and the cabal and deep state seem to all be, connected.
Right, and that's why, and it's such a confusing time for everybody. And I guess this is what what he told me earlier was this is actually I guess you could say elites, religion, ideology, philosophy. This is this is what they go by. The high elite, the elites. So that to me, I find very interesting, and that's what I want to dive into with our next guest. And I just feel like there's so much to cover, to unearth, and I've never really understood this ideology or religion myself. I've kind of had some thoughts about it, and I've tried to understand it, but for me personally, I can never turn my back on God. But I understand that they view God in a completely, or what I would consider God, a completely different. They have a completely different view on how to look at God. They see it at a completely different angle.
Well, there's
Sure, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Well, there's a lot about reversals. And the thing is, I think there is an understanding that the demiurgic God or the lower creator gods and the formulation of religion isn't what it seems to be on the outside. So there is a bit of maybe a rebellious factor. And I think there's a lot to learn from each other in order to represent ourselves in the most authentic spiritual way. That should be the end result of anybody's soul journey, I would hope. I want to understand, though, maybe the different levels, because I don't think everybody that is a part of the Church of Satan participates in like ritual abuse, sacrifice, pedophilia. There is a difference between the Lucifer energy and the Satan energy. I can understand, like, on a galactic history level, there is something about Saturn and the sun, and then the black sun, and I know he'll delve into it. But yeah, when it comes down to abusing anybody non-consensually, then that's to me the loss of God. and
yeah, no.
Define God differently. I can understand people's issue with religion, but when we lose our humanity, when we lose integrity and love, then
right, and that's kind of the questions I want to ask him too. I mean, this isn't just about and for my audience, I would like to clarify, this isn't about following an evil being with horns and a pitchfork that hates everybody, hates humanity, because who in their right mind would follow that? It's a much more complex issue. That's just surface. You're scratching the surface level when you look at it like that. It's actually a very complex philosophy and ideology that I want to dive into with him so he can explain it to everybody and make everyone understand what it actually is. What we're doing is just uncovering, we're turning stones that people don't want to turn. We're unearthing things that people do not want to unearth. We are going to the bottom of the swamp and bringing things up to the surface that people don't want to see. And that's the whole objective of this show. And that's the idea of this show from the beginning, from the get-go. That's what you and I wanted to do, is bring topics to people that are very uncomfortable, that doesn't sit well, that they can't digest well, and bring it to light. And that's what we're doing. That's the whole objective of this show. We're going to be bringing them on in about 4 minutes. But before then, I want everyone to go to our Patreon link. If Alex could, Alex, the man behind the curtain there, could put it up there. And please subscribe to our show. We have question and answer shows just for the Patreons, just for their subscribers. You can go and ask Laura and I any questions. We have shows specifically just for you. We also send out, what is it? Is it a monthly newsletter, or what is it, Laura?
More bi-weekly.
Bi-weekly?
Yeah, and there's going to be, videos shared, podcasts, discounted sessions, check-ins for astrology, but it depends which one you actually choose to sign up for. So when you click onto the link, you'll see the different descriptions. So we're not, the goal is, to a month, but there'll always be like interaction in the private group. And that private group, you can join, and we will have to verify that you're a subscriber just to keep the space protected.
Right, and it will be VIP. We will treat you with the highest priority. I got to go through this so we can get to our guests, because I'm so excited to get to our guests, Laura. The next thing, guys, Q Shield right here. I'm telling you, I haven't had headaches. Laura and I have a link that you can go to, synergyscience.com. Right there at the bottom, it's scrolling, and get yourself an EMF blocker. I believe in it. I don't wear the mask. That's me. I believe it's coming from a different source, but we can get into that later with maybe another guest, hopefully, that could shed some light on that. But without further ado, Laura, why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest?
Yes. Well, Mark Passio is an anarchist, an independent researcher, a public speaker, radio talk show host, conference organizer, and freedom activist from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Mark has undertaken the task of assembling vast amounts of information in the areas of metaphysics, occultism, spirituality, symbology, and consciousness studies. In 2007, Mark began presenting this information in the form of a presentation series entitled What on Earth is Happening, with the intention of bringing the implications of this body of knowledge to greater public awareness. And he's launched his own website in 2008 called whatonearthishappening.com. And we will be sure to share that with you. And there's much more to share. And we got to get him on here, and can't wait. So come on, Mark.
Laura, David, thank you so much for bringing me onto the show. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely.
So great to have you. Can you just clarify the pronunciation of your last name for people?
It is Passio.
Okay. Yeah, so I know David wants to jump in. He's got all sorts of questions.
Yeah,
sure.
I gotta be quite honest with you. I'm so intrigued by my first question is this, and I think everyone wants to ask this question. It's on everyone's mind. Is what the hell compels somebody? You grew up in the Catholic Church, am I correct?
I grew up with a traditional Roman Catholic family background in South Philadelphia.
Okay, so my first most obvious question would be, to kick this show off, is how can someone that grew up in the Catholic Church, who had a relationship with God, fall into or follow the philosophy or ideology or religion of the LaVeyan Satanism? Am I saying that correct? Is it LaVeyan or Levian?
It is LaVeyan Satanism, after the original high priest and founder of the Church of Satan, Anton Sander LaVey.
Okay, so that would be my question is, how old were you? When did this pique your interest, and how did you fall into this?
Sure, great question. And I'm very honest and open about my background. It's something that I actually debated when I was first going into public teaching, whether I would be completely honest and open about it. And I decided that would be the best policy, is to share my background with people so that they would get an understanding of where my former mindset was and how I turned that completely around. So I'll go back even further than when I got involved in Satanism, to my early family life, actually. Again, I grew up in South Philadelphia. Italian family background, Roman Catholic, and people who I would say general members of my family, friends, community, people within the church community, within my school, teachers, etc. All were the type of people who didn't question things very much. They accepted the status quo as is and just said, well, that's life. That's the way things are. We don't ask questions about why it is that way. We don't try to change things. We don't try to rock the boat. Just accept it and go along to get along, and everything will be okay in your life. And I would say I accepted that ideology and that way of thinking and that way of life from when I was pretty young. And as a matter of fact, I was so into Christianity and the whole ideology of the church when I was very young, and this is something I have not even really shared with many people, even publicly on my show. I wanted to become a priest when I was 5 and 6 years old. I actually wanted to go into Catholic clergy. That is how I would say now, in retrospect, in hindsight, how indoctrinated I was into the Catholic religion. And what happened over time, many years of when I started really arriving at a higher level understanding in my own right of different social dynamics, different dynamics in the world, I would ask questions that the people around me in that culture, in that entire mindset, had absolutely no answers for. They could not provide an adequate answer to the question of why. It was always, don't bother asking why. This is just how it is, or the church said so, or that's just how life goes. Okay. So don't try to worry about why it is that way. Don't try to get down to the bottom of what made it that way or the origin of it. It is that way. Just accept it and live your life. And I really honestly never really had that kind of a personality. I was always pretty driven. I was always, you almost could say, even from a young age, I had a very driven, almost obsessive personality to get to the bottom of things and to work things out for myself. So probably when I was about 11 to 12 years old, I started deeply, deeply questioning a lot of the concepts and precepts of organized religion, of any organized religion in general, but specifically of the Roman Catholic background. And because there was no really deeper knowledge as to what religion was, as I understand it now, to be as a dialectic, which we can go into what that means. Because I didn't really understand any of the astro-theological frameworks that underlay modern religions of all types, the cultural religions all have underlays of astrotheology. Some of your listening audience might be familiar, your viewing audience might be familiar with astrotheology, some may not, but again, we can maybe possibly get into some of that. I didn't have any of that underlying knowledge. I just saw it at that point when I was younger and questioning everything, and nobody had any deep psychological or sociological answers to provide for me. It was just, shut up, kid. Don't ask those questions. Okay. So what happened is I began to, all of those questioning instincts started turning into anger and hatred, because what I perceived at the time was I'm being lied to. And in a way I was, and in a way I was not being given any answers because these people had none for themselves. They were very ignorant, and it wasn't like they were malicious, but because they weren't questioning individuals, they just accepted thing at base value. And
right, they just blindly followed.
That's right. That's right. And I saw that that wasn't a good ideology to take. I saw that that will lead to bad things in the world. You know, look, all you have to do is study, crack open a history book and look at World War II, and you'll see where that'll eventually get you, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, that's the order follower mentality. That's the don't question anything, but listen to what we tell you mentality.
It's kind of how we have gotten where we are today.
It's exactly how
everybody has that herd mentality. People
That's
are
right.
sheep. And people can disagree with me or agree with me that, but that's how mainstream media controls people.
Sure.
And I know we can jump into that later, but
that's exactly how the world.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No problem. It's a great point. That's exactly how the world has arrived to the state that it is at right now. So, I would say around the age of, really 13 years old, this turned into extreme anger, and I went into depression about it. And I decided around that point, maybe 13 and a half, 14, that, man, I'm going to start going into the exact opposite things. And I started delving into the world of the occult. Now, most people don't know what that is, and they don't know what it entails. And I didn't delve into the world of nonsense occultism. I went into real occultism at that age and started buying books on different occult ideologies and traditions, and studying things like tarot, studying things like ceremonial magic, ritual magic, looking into Satanism, looking into Wicca. I studied all of it. Okay. And I decided I wanted the thing that was going to drive me and my worldview and my life into the exact opposite of where I had just come from, because I perceived the whole religious world as a complete lie and a methodology of control and ignorance. And I still largely, to be honest with everyone, sort of see religion that exact same way today. I see it as a control system. I see it as something that will hold us back from truth if we don't grow beyond it spiritually. I, of course, consider spirituality as being very real, but I think most people who are in a very religious mindset don't explore spirituality and the inner world of the human psyche very much. So even knowing that then, that's what religion was really designed to do, is hold people away from that. At that point, when I was very young and in a lot of anger and a lot of hatred about what I perceived to as being lied to at the time, I just said, I'm going for broke, and I'm going into the exact opposite polarity. And I'm going to search for the deepest and darkest aspects of anything the opposite of Christianity has to offer, or the opposite of organized religion, period, has to offer. And in my studies in the occult, I came across what was known as the satanic ideology. This is concressed or crystallized, probably most in its totality, in the book known as the Satanic Bible by Anton Sander LaVey, who is Anton Levy. Okay. He basically took this name and started this ideology back in 1966, called it the Church of Satan. And there was a number of reasons he wanted to call it Satanism. Well, we can get into that as well. It's really kind of to go against the whole ideology of organized religion, take on an attitude of total selfishness, not look at service to any others, but total service to self mentality. And he gave it the name Satan because he kind of saw the biblical figure of Satan / Lucifer as, the polar opposite of this mentality that is embodied in Christianity of be selfless, help others, be altruistic, etc. And this is the type of thing that Satanism embodies. It is a religion or an ideology that embodies selfishness as its highest tenet or precept. And
is it complete service to self, like you are your own God type of philosophy?
That's almost identical to the first tenet or precept of the ideology.
So you're not. Let me just take a side note here. So you're not really worshiping some guy with a pitchfork and horns, some being called Satan or some evil demonic figure, right? It's more
that
so.
Is correct.
It's more so a philosophy of, worshiping a God and the mediator, Jesus Christ. It's more so saying, look, we are God. We can do all things through ourselves, which is God, right?
That's almost identical to what the ideology really is about. Okay. It is the first tenet of Satanism. See, I want to try to delineate between what most people believe Satanism is and even insist that it is, versus what the ideology really actually is from someone who is actually clergy. And I've actually shared this information with people on my own show. I entered the Church of Satan back in officially a couple of years before I was actually ordained as a priest within this organization back in 1997. So I believe I entered it around 93. It was a few years before I was actually made priest. 93 or 94, something right around there is when I actually became what you would call a card-carrying member. I filled out the application. They do an extensive sort of psychological profiling on you to see if you have, the mindset that they favor, and then you pay a kind of a joining dues for joining, a one-time membership fee, and then they send you a membership card and you're considered just a regular rank and file member. And if you want to go further, then you have to sort of either be appointed or ask them for a further appointment to run like a chapter in your area, which they call a grotto. I want to make it very clear. I joined the Church of Satan under an assumed name. So for people that don't know what that means, it just means I joined under a fake made-up name. I did not use my legal birth name to join this organization. I chose a name from a book that some people would consider an occult tome called the Pistis Sophia. It is one of the texts of the Nag Hammadi scriptures of the Nag Hammadi library, as it is known. Some people say that the Essenes sort of wrote these texts. They are Gnostic texts that were found near Qumran, and they are a body of literature that is not considered the official canon of the Bible. So they are like considered books that other spiritual teachers at that time wrote that didn't make it into the canon of the Bible.
Okay, 1 second, Laura, you were signaling you wanted to make a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, but if you have one that to keep in the flow of what you guys have been talking about, go for
ahead,
it.
Laura. What were you going to say? It's okay.
Yeah, well, this is also interesting. So, and I'd love to ask more about that. I mean, you're the kind of person that we could just talk to I could talk to for hours. I know David probably agrees. So the initiation process, though, I mean, when people think of Church of Satan, there's like ritual abuse, or it's not just selfishness. It's also maybe harming those that are not in consensual agreement. But we see that also in the church as far as like pedophilia with priests in the Catholic Church. So
Church of Satan per se does not take part in activities like that. I want to make it very clear that this is just a small organization that connects to the wider hierarchical network of worldwide Satanism. But they do share the ideology that the wider satanic network that really runs the whole world, that is the establishment organization or cult, if you will. I call it a cult, not an organization or an establishment. It's a cult that runs our world. Make no mistake about it. I was very, very low on that totem pole. Do not confuse the Church of Satan with being the top level elitist organizations that run the world. This is a small organization that feeds into that wider network at the higher levels of that group that called the Church of Satan.
You guys all have the same ideology, though. So what do you mean you're at the lower totem pole? Does that mean the elitist levels have a more connection to this? Like, yes. What does that mean? Like,
yes, it means that
there's actual like a hierarchy here that
yes, there's a hierarchy, and the Church of Satan is one of what you might call the front organizations that interfaces with the public. And what they are trying to do, you could look at it as a psychological vetting procedural network. They are looking for people that they can groom up into higher, more powerful areas of the worldwide satanic hierarchy. This is just an organization that is searching for people who are totally disillusioned, angry, full of hate, psychopathic. I once embodied all of those tendencies and had no framework of knowledge through which to get out of that mentality or ideology. And I knew dark occultism to a certain extent was knowledge that other people didn't know. Okay. Occultism in general, that's all it means. It means hidden.
Would you say that most secret societies are based off this? Like
not Satanism per se,
anything like that? I mean, would you say this is part of the Levian Satanism ideology, or is that completely different, or is it the same thing?
So it's difficult and takes a lot of time and study to research how the hierarchical networks fit together. But let's just call it like this. The ideology that one could learn at lower level satanic structures like the Church of Satan, taken to the utmost extreme, is really the ideology of the rulers of the world. And they make no mistake about it. They make no bones about it. Anton LaVey wrote this many, many times in his own writings. He called Satanism a philosophy for the masters of the world. He literally called it that in his own writings. And he said, the other people who aren't the wolves of the world will always be the sheep of the world, and we'll rule them because they aren't going to do anything to stop us.
I guess that's kind of where Christianity fits in, because Christianity kind of teaches people to be sheep. Correct?
It teaches them a false version. What I call churchianity teaches people a false version of turning the other cheek and forgiveness, which I don't feel real esoteric Christianity truly taught. I think those are distortions. Those are satanic distortions of real Christianity, which I've given a whole presentation, practically a 6-hour presentation, I think it is, maybe 5.5 hours, called Fake Ass Christians. A hard-hitting title that gets people's attention, but I go into all of the ways that we're not really people who call themselves Christians are Christians in name only and aren't really practicing any real true esoteric Christianity. They're practicing what I call churchianity or Constantinianity. That's what I call it.
Well, I mean, there's cover up of pedophilia in the church. I mean, it seems like the more Illuminati level of it is hiding in plain sight behind a lot of different things like politics. So at what stage in the hierarchy does it turn into human trafficking and pedophilia?
Yes.
And then it seems like more connected to the 13 families, which isn't necessarily the Church of Satan.
That's correct. It turns into that when you get past the scene level, or the level that there is any public interface with any of the institutional bodies of the world that have any power or influence in the world at any type of a high level. So if you go past the top levels of the people that run the banking system, you're going to encounter the dark occult. If you go past the top levels of the people that run the military or the police, you're going to encounter the dark occult. It's not even just Satanism. I call it the dark occult because there are several different intersecting dark ideologies, which you might call satanic ideologies, but I simply group them together for lack of a better term because this cult does not have a name. The cult that I am referring to has no name. You could read about this cult in a different context, in which the author will not tell you that it is Satanism. He called it the Anglo-American Establishment, or the Society of the Elect. That is the author Carol Quigley, who was one of the historians of this cult. He was one of the people that sort of documented their activity in the earlier part of the 20th century. And he wrote a book called Tragedy and Hope, which I highly recommend that people read and really understand what's being said there, because this individual ran with the same type of cult members that I ran with back in my youth. And he told people he agreed with them. He wanted them to act as people who would cull the world at some point. The only thing he didn't agree with them on was their secrecy. He thought that they should come out and declare themselves as the new kings of the world, the new masters of the world. The old kingships and dynasties of the ancient world are all over, and now these are the new rulers. He believed in what some occultists refer to as the externalization of the hierarchy. This is something that people in the Theosophical Society wrote about, and they called it the masters of the world coming out in the open and telling people freedom was an illusion, self-governance was an illusion, democracy, or whatever you want to call it, an idea of a constitutional republic, it was all an illusion, and you've always been our slaves. And that's really the case, and that's what people still cannot see.
Anybody who's, sorry to cut you off, but anybody who's involved in this cult or religion or ideology, they have to be, to make it at the very top, right? To make it at the very top, you have to be a psychopath.
At the top, I would say you don't have to be a psychopath. They'll favor the initiation and bringing in and moving up and grooming of psychopaths because, of course, they don't care what they do to anyone because their midbrain is damaged.
Based on service to self, right? It's service to self. And you have to be somewhat of a psychopath.
Psychopathic. You could say that it is somewhat psychopathic.
Doesn't this stem back to galactic wars and some level of, ancient issues that we can barely wrap our head around? I mean, as to why they would go this far. And that's, one thought. And then the other one is, does the hidden hand, as far as the whole concept behind the hidden hand of what it needs to achieve as a negative polarity on the planet?
Of course.
The timelines. I mean, where does that all fit in?
They're getting it. They're winning. They're getting that dark harvest without a doubt. It's happening. It's happening now. And absolutely this connects back to ancient fall of consciousness into evil. If you want to liken it biblically to a biblical allegory, I talk about this all the time, how even biblical allegory is completely misinterpreted by most modern Christians. The whole idea of the eating of the knowledge of the taking the knowledge of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, eating of that fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It does not mean to consume. This is a mistranslation of the allegorical interpretation. It doesn't mean to eat. It means to take into oneself. So instead of looking at it as to consume, like we take food into ourselves and consume it and swallow it, it means to take into oneself or make it of oneself the knowledge of good and evil. But that doesn't mean just to understand it. It means to arbitrate it. It means to take in to yourself the arbitration of the difference between right and wrong. And that's not for us to do, because we are not the creators of the universe and the creators of cosmic universal moral law, which I call natural law. The creator of the universe is that force of law. So the creator made those laws and put them into effect in the universe. Man did not. When we say that we're going to decide what good and evil, what right and wrong are, we are usurping the place of the creator. And that's the second tenet of Satanism, which we'll get to.
Wow.
That's called moral relativism. So let's if we could go into the tenets, because this is what I want to get across when it comes to this ideology. Is people think it's a bunch of crazy teenagers dressing in black robes and going out into the forest and sacrificing some animals in a fire. That's not what Satanism, that's what Hollywood wants you to think Satanism is, folks, because then you'll never understand the mindset of your rulers and masters. If you keep believing that nonsense, you will never be able to put your mind into the mindset, the psychopathic mindset of the ruling class, which is real Satanism. It's very, very important to understand if you're ever going to understand your true enemy.
So I let me digress just a little bit here. Do they not believe in an afterlife? Do they believe? I know I understand this whole service to self and this ideology, but do they not believe that? Like, for my listeners that are listening in, they're probably asking, well, what about heaven? What about hell?
Many of them are atheists. Many of them are atheists. Most of the Satanists that I worked with in the groups, admittedly very low-level groups, again, and I just want to clarify, I joined under an assumed name. I joined under the name Mark Rochar, spelled R-H-O-C-H-A-R. This is a demon name from the Pistis Sophia. It's a demon of one of the chambers of hell, as described in one of these stories in the Gnostic text, where Jesus is speaking with Mary Magdalene and explaining how the torments of hell for the sinners that go there are conducted. One of the demons that conduct some of this torture, his name was Rochar. He was a cat demon, a cat-headed demon. I'm born under the fire sign Leo, and therefore I took the name Rochar after a cat demon. Okay, so that's how I basically joined under an assumed name. And you will not look up Mark Passio in the Church of Satan's current registry and find one, because there is no Mark Passio that joined the Church of Satan. There is, however, a Reverend Mark Rochar of the Church of Satan, still active in their registry. Probably I am still considered official clergy, because I never actually wrote to these people and say, take me off your registry, excommunicate me, if you will, declergy me. I never bothered to even do that courtesy and write to them. So I'm probably still listed as official clergy of the Church of Satan under the name Mark Rochar. Just want to clarify that for people, because a lot of people hear me say I'm a priest. They then go to somebody in the Church of Satan. They ask them to look me up on their actual clergy registration list, and they don't find a Mark Passio. You will not find me listed under the name Mark Passio in the Church of Satan. You will, however, find me listed under the name Reverend Mark Rochar, R-H-O-C-H-A-R. And I just want to clarify that.
Well, what's the healing process been for you? You joined the church, and then almost it seems like you went to the other polarity, and did it present the same sort of level of frustration to the point where then...
Well, let me tell you how I got out. That's as interesting of a story as what the ideology of this whole religion is. You know, when I start getting going deeper and deeper into it, and that's the kind of person I am. I don't like to do anything just cursorily. Okay, if you listen to my show, you'll understand how deep the knowledge goes, and if you understand anything about my personality, I go obsessively deeply into whatever I start. If I start it, I'm going all the way. I don't just, scratch the surface of anything. It's always been my personality since I was very young. So I decided I'm going to go deep into this and get involved. Okay. And what I started doing was writing in what's called fanzines. Most people who are a little bit older, probably in their 40s or 50s, will know what that is. Most younger people will have never heard of that term. They're little mini magazines, self-published. They were often left in record shops, clothing stores, things like that. Little cutting-edge, little self-made magazines stapled together. They were called fanzines. Usually they were for fans of music or horror movies or, any kind of noir culture, weird stuff. Okay. It was a big thing back in the 80s and 90s, fanzines. I used to write satanic literature in fanzines throughout the East Coast, largely. And people would, ask me to write for them, write an article on Satanism, and I would do that. Then I started a death metal band. I was very into early death metal, like, at the very beginning of its creation, bands like Venom, Death, Napalm Death, stuff like that, and, the whole Earache record days for anybody that ever got into that. I started a death metal band that espoused the satanic ideology. It was called In Satanity. Okay. And, we got signed to a European record label. We got signed to a record label in Greece. We released a full album. We did a couple of demos before that. We were kind of a cutting edge death metal band at the time that kind of defined the East Coast death metal sound, actually. And the band is actually still alive. I handed it off to a friend. He's still doing it. But, I really wrote a lot of satanic lyrics, satanic ideology in this band. And that's what attracted LaVey's attention. I never asked LaVey for an appointment to priesthood. I never requested.
You actually attracted this man's attention?
That's correct. Yes.
So I didn't know that. I had no idea about that.
I never made a request to the Church of Satan to appoint me to priest. I thought about doing it, but I decided that Satanism for me was a very individualistic ideology at the time. And I only associated with a few Satanists from my area who I was very close friends with at the time. And we did our own self-practices, if you will, self-conducted rituals. And I didn't really want to start my own grotto within the Church of Satan because I looked at that as, well, that's sort of collective mindset. I don't know if I want to make my own chapter. I wasn't really that into doing that. But what happened was LaVey himself noticed my writings in fanzines, and he noticed my band and the ideology.
Your music?
What's that?
Was he listening to your music?
Well, I think what happens is reviews are done by other Satanists in satanic publications.
Oh, wow.
There were a couple of satanic publications at the time. One was called The Cloven Hoof that was put out by Blanche Barton, who was LaVey's personal partner, his life partner at the time before he died in 1997. And then there was another satanic publication called The Black Flame, which was put out by Hell's Kitchen Productions in New York City, run by Peter Gilmore, who is now the current high priest of the Church of Satan. And I think my band got reviewed in some of those publications. And I also was writing satanic ideology in other fanzines, which may have come to LaVey's attention. So he wrote to me and appointed me priest in the Church of Satan. That's their lowest rank, aside from rank and file membership. So there's everyday rank and file membership. Then up above that, there is priest. And then up above that, I believe they have magister and magistra, which are higher level magicians. And then above that, there is the high priest. And there's only above them, there is called the Council of Nine, and which is an advisory council to the high priest. And then at the top is just the high priest, which was Anton LaVey at the time.
Okay, so you're a priest. What does that entail? You being a priest, does that mean you hold seances, rituals for others?
I was empowered to act in the capacity of the rank of priest for the Church of Satan as an organization, which has spelled out powers and duties. So I could legally marry people. And to this day, I actually technically
There's people that get married in the Church of Satan.
Yes, absolutely, legally. It's an official government registered religion. So you could look this up in the government registry. The Church of Satan is officially recognized as a religion by the United States government.
Wow.
So I am actually legal clergy, believe it or not. I constitute legal clergy. I can legally marry. Okay.
Where are you
I can legally perform funeral services. Okay. So it's clergy. It's clergy just like a priesthood, except this is satanic clergy and this is a real religion.
And go ahead, Laura.
Yeah. I mean, what makes it like Satan, even though you're not, I know you don't see it as an entity. Right. What sets it apart that gives it such an identity? And yes. Where are you today with how you feel about it? That's
a great question. And this could lead very well into, what the ideology really is. First, people would ask, well, what is Satan to a Satanist? Satan to a Satanist is not what Satan represents to somebody in traditional religion or Christianity or to the average individual. Okay. There's a whole list of what Satan represents. All you have to do is type the 9 satanic statements into any search engine. You can go right to the Church of Satan's official site and see what Satan represents. And there's all kinds of aspects of human beings that Satan represents. But above all, Satan represents the self as God. That's the number one thing.
That's
self as God.
That's actually the New Age spirituality.
Oh, sorry, real quick. Is it Antichrist though? Is it Antichrist though, or is it just?
It's Antichrist in the sense, like I said, that Christians see the Christ figure in their scriptures as
connected to religion, though, because the religion kind of ruins.
There is none. There is no connection to the Satan of the biblical scriptures or the apocryphal scriptures of Christianity. None.
Unless it's through the religious propaganda, maybe. Okay, go ahead, David. Sorry, right?
See, there's two reasons they choose Satan as the symbol, right? There's two reasons they choose Satan as the symbol. Satan is chosen to associate Satanism with this very quaint belief in the devil under the Christian ideology. And people hearing this for the first time will be like, no, that's not what it is. Folks, I was a priest in the religion. I'm telling you, from being a priest, if you wanted to learn about Christian rituals and Christian ceremonies, you'd go to a Christian priest. If you wanted to learn about Jewish ceremonies and rituals and practices, you'd go to a Jewish rabbi. If you wanted to learn about the teachings and practices of the Muslim, Islamic faith, you would go to an imam. Okay, I was a priest in Satanism. I know totally, deeply what the ideology entails. I don't think that I know it. And I've been trying to expose this for over 15 years with very, very little success. Some people get it, but most people will refuse to because they're hooked on the idea that Satan is the biblical figure in the Bible. Okay. They use that deliberately because they don't want you learning their mindset. So they took that to dissuade anybody from looking at what Satanism really is. They know that's the thing that will keep most people from ever understanding their ideology. Okay. Second, they deliberately identify with the force in nature that creates chaos, disorder, and the opposite of evolution, what in occultism is known as involution. And in the ancient Hebrew teachings, this was called Ha-Shatan, which means the Satan, or the adversary or the opposer of the evolutionary force of creation, which is the creator of the universe and its laws.
Right, it could be a catalyst, and then there's Janus, and there's Anubis, and there's different archetypes.
Sure, it's David. Like Horus versus Set. They're two opposite polarities, but they represent the sun and the light. One is the true light, one is the dark light.
Right.
So, go ahead. Yeah. So my question leads to this new, these new ideologies that are coming out, like The Secret or Eckhart Tolle. Is that all a form of like the New Age religion that's pushing forth now? Is that all a form of this Levian Satanism?
It's a third dialectic trap that is laid for people that don't fall into the trap of organized religion or the trap of dark occultism.
But it is a trap. It's a trap.
It's a trap. I call it the last cul-de-sac before the gold mine. Like people will say this phrase, last cul-de-sac before the gold mine, right? Where you hit the jackpot. You don't quite get there because it keeps taking you around and around in a circle where the gold mine's over here. And then there's a cul-de-sac that goes around in a circle. You traveled this long path to get to that gold mine to get the spiritual gold. But then there's a circle right before it that keeps you going around and around in a trap. That's New Ageism to me. That's the New Age religion.
So they go hand in hand.
The Satanists that I worked with,
guiding people right into that.
Satanists that I worked with told me that they were the controllers of the publishing houses of the New Age religion. And I believe them. I absolutely feel that they were telling me the truth. They said, we are going to put so much false spirituality out into the world through the publishing houses that we control that we will have people's heads spinning on their shoulders. They told me this while I was involved with them.
So how do you view Jesus Christ and Christianity
as an organized religion? An organized religion, then and now, I don't hold it in high regard. as an esoteric understanding that embodies a form of consciousness, I hold it in utmost regard to an idea of apotheosis, even, and be elevated to an idea that it connects with the godhood, with the Godhead. But as far as organized religion goes, you can leave all that in the garbage dump as far as I'm concerned. And I'm very vocal about that. I think all religion needs to go for humanity to be free. All cultural religion needs to go. The religion of money needs to go. Most of all, the religion called government needs to go, because that's one of the biggest religion there is. The religion of the belief in authority is an utter religion. It's a false religion, and it is teaching an ideology that goes directly against the laws of the Creator. Directly against it, and most people are reeled into that satanic religion, and they believe in it with firmness, with absolute religious fervor, and they don't even understand they're going against the law of creation by even accepting it and believing in that nonsense of authority and government.
Go ahead, Laura.
And doesn't that create like artificial timelines? And isn't this the issue of like energy harvesting, artificial timelines? And what AI component do you feel connects to this?
Look at where we're at. Look at the timeline we're on. Is this where anybody envisioned we'd be at in 2020? I thought people would be enlightened by this point. I thought we would get rid of these childish notions of, having to have an intercessor between you and creation and the understanding of its laws. I thought we would be far beyond the idea of not accepting personal responsibility to make the world a better place than how we found it. And then we would need government officials to do something like that and to tell us what we can and can't do as sovereign individuals. I mean, we're on a timeline where we've rejected all of that responsibility, and we're heading down the drain as a result. And so it's sad.
You don't see this timeline that we're in right now as a timeline of enlightenment. You see it as a timeline of enslavement.
I do. Wow.
You don't feel that we can break away from this?
But can we?
Yes, we can. Absolutely, we can. But will we? See, can and will are two entirely different dynamics. Can means infinite possibility. Sure, we can. We can do anything if we set our mind and will to it.
The direction we are headed, you feel deep down that this is enslavement.
It's worse. It's going to be. Look, I don't want to depress your listenership. I'm already sort of depressed enough over it. But folks, if we continue down this trajectory, death will be preferable. That's what the concept liberty or death means.
Because the mainstream media is controlled by the elites, correct? Obviously.
Controlled by the Satanists. They are the lapdogs.
The people, which are controlling the masses.
But there's got to be some breakthrough here that we're seeing, right, David?
There can be. I'm not saying that it's impossible.
I didn't interrupt.
Yeah,
this
willpower
right here is a breakthrough, Laura.
Yeah, willpower will have to be applied in a big way. Willpower will have to be applied in a big way. And do I see people having the will to take in knowledge such as this? I see it in a tiny, infinitesimally small fraction, and it's not going to get the job done long term. This idea in New Ageism of it's only going to take a tiny few is not how the dynamic really works. I'll tell you what the magic number really is. I've talked about this over and over and over again, and some of your listenership, if they're somewhat familiar with numerology, occult numerology, they'll understand these people go by the numbers and they do things very ritualistically, and they don't change their methods because they don't have to. They have always worked, and they have always accomplished their goals with their current methodologies of mind control and deception, because the public is still too unconscious and cannot see what they are doing. They cannot see what this sorcerer class is doing. Okay, so their magic number, which they know is the flipping dynamic of any dynamic in the world, is 51%. 51% have to reject the old way of thinking and embrace something different. Then the dynamic will change. Do you think 51% of our world even wants to know the truth about what's going on?
Not at all.
Okay, well, there you have it. And look, here's the thing. What's their high holiday? What was the high holiday of Nazism during the Third Reich? Does anyone know?
I don't know.
It was a festival of light and the spring rites. Known as
May.
It was May 1st, May Day.
Oh, okay? That's right. Then Trump changed it to Law Day, correct?
Yes. Yes.
He did that on purpose.
Oh, you're talking about Hitler. Yeah, Hitler. Now,
yeah, because he changed it on purpose because of that, correct?
in communism, what was the main holiday? It became known as their Labor Day.
Well, isn't that Beltane? I mean,
Beltane, May 1st. It's known in Satanism as the highest Sabbath of the year, of the 4 major Sabbaths, the 4 midpoints of the seasons. And Beltane, or May 1st, is known as Walpurgisnacht in Satanism. Walpurgis's night. Okay? So they all share the same high holiday. And it's 5/1. May 1st is 5/1, right? Okay.
isn't this a part of the? Sorry.
Yeah.
Am I okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
Jump in. Isn't this a part of the reversals though, like the Baphomet and the creating of? It's like the paganism thing isn't necessarily satanic. It's earth worship that seems to understand cycles, but there are so many different levels to all of it that there is a dark shadow expression of it that some might deem to be demonic. Because if you look at Pan or some of these archetypes connected to, devil is very different than demiurge or very different than Satan, which seems to hold some sort of place in the galactic cores of Andromeda and Milky Way, which Milky Way became a fallen system. It seems to be, a part of the free will universe duality. And I don't mean to get like super wordy here, and I kind of lost my train of thought, but when you're talking about, all of this, it's like we are in a dark timeline, and it's a little shocking. It seems very catalytic. And my question is, are very awakened and enlightened people at the mercy of what the collective decides if it chooses not to wake up? I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you see
physically, yes. Physically, yes.
That's not the answer I want.
Yeah. So, spiritually, absolutely not. Mentally, you don't have to be. It can create distress and depression, and it's sort of been doing that to me. Now, I'm so strong, but I'm not of infinite strength and have never claimed to be. I'm a flawed human like anyone else. I get depressed. I get tired. I feel like it's worthless sometimes, but I keep going. I keep pushing myself to keep going by an act of my will.
Where are you at with your spirituality now? Like, where are you now?
At a very profoundly deep level of the understanding of natural law and aligning my behavior with it. And that's where everyone really does need to be. But they don't even know what that means. Most people don't even know what that means because natural law.
For the listeners that don't understand so much, can you break down the natural law for us?
Yes. Yeah. And before we even do that, I want to get to what Satanism's ideology is, because what you have to understand is ultimately what these people who are the sorcerers and controllers of our world right now want to do is to hold back the understanding of natural law and how to align our behavior with it from the bulk of humanity, because freedom is entirely dependent upon bringing our behavior into alignment with the real moral laws of creation. So there's a one overarching law that as true morality increases in the aggregate of a population, that population is going to move toward more freedom. And as a whole population of beings move into deeper immorality and the breaking of cosmic moral law, we move deeper into bondage. That's an immutable law of creation eternally.
Well,
and most people don't understand it.
Is that almost like how some would define karma?
It's like real karma. That's how karma. That's how karma really works. Karma doesn't work that if you stab somebody and take their money, a piano falls on your head when you round the corner. That's a little child's version and a cartoon version of karma, okay? Long term, over cycles of time, over long stretches of time, over a whole timeline, okay? Karma goes to work over a whole society en masse and in the aggregate. That's why we often...
Because the collective consciousness and the share... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely, you're correct. It's an aggregate. Karma is an aggregate consequence. Okay, so again, the laws of consequence don't just work over one individual. They do in their own way, but not in the way that people think of karma. Largely, karma is what I call the law of freedom. As morality increases in a population, freedom increases in a population. It's a mathematical equation. You could look at it as morality and freedom are directly proportional to each other. And then people will ask the question, well, what is true morality? And that's what the understanding of natural law is. Let me frame it in my own journey to understand why I got out, what their ideology is, why I got out, and then what I learned after getting out, because that progression will really help people to really understand this in a deep way in the time that we have. I recognized that Satanism and dark occultism in general was not what I thought it was. Once I got involved in it, and then they made me a priest, and then they said, well, you can connect with some of these other grottos in your area. And I started attending grotto meetings and rituals. And then I started seeing, hey, look at who's involved. Judges are attending this satanic ritual. There's doctors who work at the hospital down the road coming to this house, in the hospital administration. Okay. Politicians, people on the city council arriving at the satanic ritual house where the ritual was to be conducted. All right. Teachers, bankers, you name it. You name the area and influence and power structure and the infrastructure of any level of society. Satanists were there, and they were at some of the highest positions of power of those institutions. And when I started seeing that, I was like, whoa.
And I would
this is something altogether different than what I thought it was.
Right. So I would imagine the higher you get up, the darker it gets, correct?
Absolutely. Look, I freely admit, David, I was at the Boy Scout level of Satanism. And I'm telling you, I was around some of the most evil, psychopathic, yet highly intellectual and driven and willful people that I have ever met in my entire life. And I could only imagine where it goes.
I don't understand their concept of the soul. Do they not believe in the soul? Do they believe that they just die? That's it, kaput, it's over?
Many of them do. Yes, many. Not all.
So
it's not a blanket statement.
At all.
Many of them do not. Some of them do, but they're the minority. And I would say that some of the very higher level ones do understand that there's a spiritual nature to the universe and there is a soul. Okay. The higher level ones do, believe it or not. Let me tell you what they're really rebelling against. They are rebelling against the laws of consequence in nature called natural law, karma, universal moral law, whatever you want to call it. Okay. They are so enraged that exists, and they know that it exists. Okay. And they want to be able to do whatever they want without consequence. See, they hate that they are bound by any law in creation. They see the whole universe as a prison. That's their whole mindset. They see the entirety of creation as a prison because there are consequential laws for behavior, for human behavior.
That's why they're mad at the creator.
That's right. That's right. And that's why they want to usurp the place of the creator of the universe by becoming God in a tiny little morsel of the universe called Earth.
Our use of technology, and that's what AI basically is
which will eventually shield them from physical death.
Yes, yeah. And jumping timelines through, all these different methods and what goes on an underground bases and off planet and the kind of beings that they generate, the great alien agenda, it's all connected.
They're connected with off-world. They're connected with off-world intelligences. I would say that they connect with hyper-dimensional, or what you might call other dimensional intelligences. Without a doubt, they believe in that. Some of them will act to summon forces like that. And again, I don't necessarily subscribe to all of that, but they believe in it. See, again, another thing people have to understand is someone else's deeply held convictions and religious beliefs. You don't have to share them. You don't have to believe what these people believe. They believe in it.
Group mind thing. And then there's, assimilating humans into a hive mind in order to lose sovereignty. But real quick, 'cause I know we need to get questions from audience, and David might have one more question, but isn't there an ancient hatred of the earth and the Sophia energy, and this Baphomet thing is connected to utilizing the trauma of the exploded planets at things like Tiamat and Maldek? I mean, is that anything that came up?
I think that our asteroid belt is an exploded planet. I think that something so tragic happened there that's where it eventually went, to the destabilization of an entire planetary being, that was once a planet. And I think that can happen here. I think that's how far we can go into evil. That evil can win. A lot of people want to believe, no, good always wins. No, good doesn't always win. Good has to have willpower behind it to win. Folks, do not think I'm saying that these Satanists are all powerful. They are not. As a matter of fact, they're like unloved little angry children, okay?
Right.
That are actually worthy of derision, okay? But in the 3D space, these people have used their powers of intellect and their drive and their will to deceive and manipulate the masses of people with an innumerable barrage of mind control techniques that most people have fallen for because they have no spiritual shielding against it. They have no mental, emotional, and psychological shielding against it. And, don't think that these people aren't powerful adversaries and enemies in their own right. We should never disrespect them as an enemy, as an opponent, okay? Disrespect them as a total evil psychopath, but never feel like, oh, we could easily defeat these people. They're very powerful in the 3D space and even beyond, because they know what they're doing. They know everything about how the human psyche works and how to manipulate it, and they know the real natural sciences and real laws of nature, and they know how to sort of skirt these things.
They rebel against it.
They rebel against it because they get other people to do their bidding. They're not getting the big brunt of karmic debt and consequence come down on their heads. Their order followers are the police and military.
Mind control and pedophilia, it's like a child's not making a choice.
That's a little different, and that's the exception to the rule. That's a very, 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 very tiny percentage. That is physical hard wiring through trauma, through physical abuse and trauma, which is the extreme instance, and I would say that is the rare instance comparatively. But most people are just words are whispered in their ear, and they're told this is true when it's completely false, and they use their free will to accept it as true and then go and act on it. And that they're karmically responsible for that, because we may not be responsible for the things that we learned when we were a child that weren't true. Other people embedded those beliefs into us, but we are responsible for straightening our own head out as an adult. And people don't want to do that work. They don't want to take responsibility for undoing the things that they have taken on into their belief system that aren't serving who we are and where we say we want to go as a species.
I agree with you that, but I have a question. So sure. I want to clarify on this. So basically, this would lead to transhumanism. This is why they want to usurp karma, because they don't want the karma. They don't want universal karma coming back to them. They want to be their own gods, almighty, everything, and usurp karma. And that is why we're going into this AI transhumanism direction, to where they can just live forever and do whatever they want to do. And basically the universe will be their playground. So ultimately, they really are scared of death.
Yeah, absolutely. They eventually want to be able to transfer their consciousness into some form of artificial intelligence device so that they can continue in another body or in some form of a cyborg type body system.
They're not really trusting God. They're not trusting the Creator on.
Of course not.
The natural
they want to be God. Not only don't they want to trust God.
Why can't they just surrender to the source they came from? Why are they fighting against the thing that
we're allowing it? The people are allowing them to win.
Because the cabal and these things wouldn't exist unless we were feeding it as a thing. And that's where the lack of awakening is happening, right?
Let me try to frame it within the satanic ideology, okay? So, and let me just say, folks say, oh, you can't ever leave these organizations. You don't know what you're talking about. I left as easily as saying, I don't want to be involved in this anymore, and this is the last time you'll see me. And they're like, don't let the door hit you in the ass, son. Just like that. They're like, you think we need you? We don't need you. We don't need anybody. We already own and control the world. We already own and control all the countries, all the banks, all the police, all the military. There are lapdogs. You think we need you, boy? They're like, out you go, and don't let us see you again. And they said, go do your worst, trying to tell whoever you want to tell. They don't care. They feel like they have this place on lock. And in a matter of fact, they do.
It's a done deal. It's a done deal.
What about
to them?
Though? Obviously, they're threatened by something if there's so much censoring and there's so many tactics.
They're threatened by people really understanding how they think, who they are, and learning natural law, because that will totally turn their game board upside down on their heads.
So they are afraid of some things about us, right?
They're afraid of our capacity to learn and activate our will. That doesn't mean that we're doing it, but they are certainly afraid of the human capacity to learn, to grow, and to activate our will and actually make a difference in the world and put our knowledge into practice. That's what wisdom is. They're afraid of people doing that. They don't want that. And they stop that by stopping knowledge. They want to stop people from the knowledge of natural law itself. That's the most deeply occulted knowledge in the world.
But is it a shock that like Epstein got busted and Hollywood's crumbling, or did they expect that on the timeline? Like, okay, well.
No, I don't necessarily think they just planned that to happen.
No, not planned it, but is that like a fluke? Like they're like, oh my God.
Yeah, they definitely don't want that coming out. The whole thing with Pizzagate, the whole thing with the Podesta emails, they don't want the public to understand. That's where the whole fake news narrative came from. They're like, oh, they're in a panic mode. They're like, tell everybody this is all fake news, and the media just runs with fake news. They can't even debunk it because you could download the emails. It's a 5 gigabyte Mbox file. You could download it right from WikiLeaks and read their emails. Read what they're talking about trafficking children. I mean, it's all out there publicly for anybody that wants to understand it. So yeah, that was panic mode for them. They don't want people to understand this. But the last thing they want people to understand is to understand their ideology and to understand what natural law is. The satanic ideology can be summed up in 4 basic tenets or axioms, underlying beliefs. Okay. The first one is that the highest aspect of the purpose for life is service to self, selfishness mentality, what I would just call egoism, whatever you want to call it. You have to stop looking at Satanism as the worship of any entity and start looking at it as the elevation of the self to godhood. Okay, so now start with that as your premise. Start with that as your baseline axiom, your fundamental belief system. Okay, where does it go from there? Well, if I'm God, right, I could basically make up whatever rules I want. Good can be whatever I say it is. Bad can be whatever I say it is. I'm the lawmaker. I'm God. I'm the utmost in creation. I'm the highest power, right? So forget there being any objective standard of right and wrong behavior. That's whatever I say it is. And this is the original sin of Eden. This is the original sin of the biblical allegory of Eden. It's humanity saying, I will take into myself and arbitrate what good and evil are, what right and wrong are. That's called moral relativism, and that is the second tenet of Satanism. The first tenet is pure egotism. Self is God. There's no higher power. Now, think about this, folks. How many people do you know are highly egotistical and think that they're just the highest power that there is? How many atheists are out there that think mankind is just the highest power that there is and there's no other law in creation? If you can get away with it, that's it. Unless man punishes you, we're the highest power that there is. I would say the bulk of humanity has now been swayed to that mentality, truly. And the bulk of humanity serves themselves first. They have a service to self mentality. They're like, how many people comparatively, okay, if you looked at the actual numbers and dynamics and the percentages, engage in a service to self or versus a service to others and or a service to truth mindset.
95%.
There you have it. It's at 90 to 95% versus 5. Right.
The biological vessel with its chakra system and energetic meridians cannot handle toxicity and hatred and darkness without it really compromising the physical vessel. I mean, we can't be healthy really in the long run if we're only connected to false light.
Without a doubt, that these people are totally connected to the whole inversion principle. Everything that they teach and bring forward into the world is inverted and corrupt. Look at every institution.
And to vampire off of others to make up for that lack of direct connect with true source, which is literally a sovereign
I love what you said about vampire. These are vampires. This is vampirism. You know, the allegory of this occult ideology and their differences in thinking was actually what the TV series True Blood was about. I tell this to my viewership all the time. You know, True Blood was about vampires, and there was two sects of vampires. One believed in staying hidden and operating occultically in the shadows, and then the other group believed in what they called mainstreaming, feeding on people in public and telling people about their existence. That's the externalization of the hierarchy in the dark occult. And there's people in the dark occult that have these two opposing ideologies. They sort of, you know, have differences of opinion and how they want to go about it. I think we're starting to see the people who favor the externalization of the hierarchy win out, and this is what this whole thing is about. They are going to lock things down further and further and further until this class of people comes out and says we're the gods of the world and we will kill anybody who opposes us.
And that's why we're conditioned. That's why they're conditioning the youth, and they're indoctrinating people in schools, and that's why they're going to try to bring in pedophilia as the LGBTQP, the P at the end of at the end there. We're going to bracket it up. They're going to put it in the same bracket. Yep. I know normalization
of insanity and inversion of everything that is good. Everything that is good is now bad. Everything bad is now good.
The people that are wearing masks and scared of this virus, they don't realize that they have just enslaved themselves into bondage. They are now slaves to this system. That is what they've just allowed themselves to be. Am I correct?
Without a doubt. We've been slaves. Humanity has been enslaved. It's not that we're enslaving ourselves now. These people have already been ruling us through mind control and belief that we're free.
Here's the thing, and they've been able to accomplish policing each other. Now people are policing each other.
That's right.
With this bondage. Like, you don't need, I walk around without a mask because I like my air, I like my oxygen. And people with the mask that don't seem to see, they don't have the veil lifted yet. They don't understand what's really going on here. They don't understand the big picture. They will harass me and tell on me to the manager of the store, he doesn't have a mask on. It's like we're in third grade. You know,
and it's because they believe in
They
believe in the nonsense story that the mainstream media has told them about the deadliness of this alleged pathogen that spreads the way they say it spreads. You know, I have a totally different view on that. That probably is going to be the purview of this show. But, you know, for the purposes of getting people to understand how I came out of it, first of all, I really deeply understood their mentality, which was total egotism, moral relativism, which there's no objective right and wrong. It's subjective, and it's whatever I think it is, you know, and no, it is not, ladies and gentlemen. Morality is objective. If you're a moral relativist, you are destroying human freedom and you're part of the problem. Okay. So that's Satanism. Satanism, one of the biggest tenets is moral relativism, the belief that there's no such thing as real right and wrong objectively in nature. It's different for every human being and we can arbitrate it. That's the taking of the bite of the fruit of Eden and flaunting that in the Creator's face and God's face and saying, you're not the law creator, you're not the maker of moral law, humans are, or I am. Okay, now the third tenet,
we're going to take questions because we're running out of time, and there's a lot of people that have a lot of questions for you.
Yes, and it's an absolute lack of humility. It's like humility is lost when there's egotism, and the ego is a gift in this free will universe.
There's two basic not competing, but complementary forces: free will and natural law. We have free will to act and choose our behaviors, but we may not behave without consequence. There's always choice followed by consequence. The causal factor is the choice, and then the behavior creates the manifestation. That's the real law of attraction, folks. That's how natural law really works. Natural law is eternal. It's immutable. It is based on objective morality, and it gives us the consequences of the choices that we make and then the behaviors that we choose and enact.
Okay, Mark, I'm going to go ahead and read this first question for you.
Sure.
Mark, you said the founding fathers weren't perfect, but we're in a boost in consciousness. We're boosting consciousness. Is the Q movement a similar boost in consciousness? Can you expand more thoughts on Q? Justin Carpenter.
I'm not going to have too many good thoughts to say about that. I would never compare the founding fathers to the so-called Q movement. I think Q is some intelligence agency psyop, from deep in the deep state, to get people to stand down and not take any action themselves, and to think, oh, the white hats got it. They got this. Don't worry about it. We don't need to act. I don't subscribe to it. I think we need to all take the personal responsibility of changing the world for the better ourselves. And when we do that, the creator of the universe comes to our own individual assistance. There's this idea that God helps those who help themselves. Don't wait for any kind of a savior. Whether it be a religious figure savior, whether it be saviors from an off-world intelligence, or whether it be from some hidden agency known as Q within the government that are the real white hats. I don't subscribe to any of that.
No, and that's awesome, and that's what you've been able to overcome. Fortunately, I feel like I know enough proactive people that take the breadcrumbs of Q, but they're not complacent, and some are, and you're not complacent as a being, and you are a role model.
I don't wait for somebody else to tell me any of those dynamics. I study them for myself very deeply and come to accurate conclusions about the dynamics taking place around me. I don't need somebody saying this is how it is. I do listen to eclectic variety of researchers and people sharing their research, and then take it all and weed out inconsistencies, and then come to an accurate understanding of it to the best of my ability by using the trivium process.
Okay, let's get to the next question. Go ahead.
What is the difference between dark Luciferianism and Satanism?
Fantastic question. Dark Luciferians are those who I would say do understand that there is such a force in creation and law as natural law or karma, moral law, and they have rejected it, and they do know that there are consequences for the rejection of that, so they get other people to bloody their hands for them. The dark Luciferians are the ones at the highest levels of power and control of our world, and Lucifer simply means light bringer. That's all it really means, okay? And there's two variants of Lucifer as the light bringer. Is it the true light of the creator of the universe and the laws of the creator, or is it the dark light of sorcery and manipulation? And knowing how that works and then manipulating that dynamic to wield it as a weapon over the ignorant, okay? That's dark Luciferianism. Okay, so the dark Luciferians do understand how karma really works, how natural law really works, but they are in rebellion against that and hate that it exists. So their worldview is, we will reign in hell rather than serve in heaven. We will become gods on earth and rule other people that we will turn into our slaves and subjects. And Satanists are slightly different. They take on a similar ideology, but they believe that the universe is a static, dead, physical matter only place with no spirit. They are more atheistic, and they believe in Satan as a force that will enable them to have power and dominion over the world, and they sort of do the bidding more of the dark Luciferian higher level sorcerer class, in my estimation. There are people who would disagree with that assessment, but as I've studied it from an insider perspective, that is how I make the delineation between Luciferianism, or what I call dark Luciferianism, and Satanism.
All right, next question. Mark, can you speak about occult green language and how it is used against us by the dark occultists?
Well, this is basically simple alchemical language. There's a lot of different examples of it, and you could look it up and read about it. Basically, it's like, things, that essentially sound like something. You could look at, they're puns. They're word puns and word plays. One of the ways that they use this is in veneration of the force of the dark sun. Again, they don't have a name, this cult, okay? So I have referred to them as the cult of the black sun, as have other researchers. The Nazis had a secret society that was inner order of the SS, the Schutzstaffel, or the protection squadron of the Third Reich. Hitler's own protection squadron was the SS, or Schutzstaffel. And within the Schutzstaffel, which was considered some of the highest levels of the Germanic and Teutonic forces, were dark occultists, led by Heinrich Himmler and Carl Willigut and Hans Kammler and other dark occultists that their ideologies stemmed out of ideologies like Ariosophy and theozoology, ideologies that created the Nazi religion. And they called themselves Die Schwarze Sun, the Black Sun. That's probably the closest thing that I could give them to a name. Again, people like Carol Quigley have called them the Society of the Elect. Other people have called them the Illuminati. I personally hate that term.
Is that connected to Vril, though? Sorry to jump in, but
they studied Vril forces and used that to their advantage. Absolutely. They created another society, which they called the Brotherhood of the Bell, the SS Brotherhood of the Bell. But that goes to the green language, Bell or Baal or Bill. It's one of their God's names. And again, when I say their God, they don't see Satan as an actual entity. They don't see Lucifer as an actual entity. It's an archetype. It's a concept. In the ancient world, the B and L consonants were considered the sun god. So in Phoenicia, Cana, this was Bel. In Babylon and Ur and Sumer, Baal and Ur, Bill. Bill was the older incarnation of it, and it morphed when it went into like the region of the Carthaginians, like the Levant area. It then became Baal. Okay, so Bill, Baal, Bel. All of it.
Why do they sacrifice children to that, though?
Well, a lot, because it's the old ancient astrotheological ritual that is, again, the fertility rites of spring. The midpoint of spring is when the ancient solar cults would offer a sacrifice to the earth to ensure a bountiful harvest. They believed in magic in the blood. They believed that the blood was the life force, and it was connected to the life force in the earth and in the stars. Okay, they knew ultimately that we were of star matter and our planets were of star matter, and they believed if you put blood into the earth at a certain time of the year, certain dark elements of this solar cult, that then the earth would be bountiful and there would be a big harvest that would sustain people through the winter months, which was called the season of death. They would have to hoard and store food and hope that their harvest was enough that they would survive the cold months into the beginning of spring. So that's the time where the planting season's really in full swing, and then you're going to harvest it later in the course of the year before descending into fall and the sun losing its strength. This was all about the sun and the earth. Okay, and that's why they gave sacrifices in the ancient world through blood ritual sacrifices. Exactly. Exactly.
All right, let's get to the next question.
Who was the god that they sacrificed to? The sun god Huitzilopochtli. That was the god that they killed tens of thousands of people on the altars at Teotihuacan, but
the Mayan cultures. Yes.
Yeah.
And I all about the Mayan calendar and I studied that.
To go back to that former question about green language, right? Just think about it. What do we all focus on our energy? We focus it on bills. To pay bills, what do you pay bills with? The dollar bill, right? Okay, right. It's all there. The bull is Satan. The concept of Satan is bull. That's connected back to the sun god when the sun was in Taurus, the constellation of Taurus, in the precession of the equinoxes. It's the Wall Street symbol.
Calendar with the ox.
Of course, it's the Wall Street symbol, the golden bull.
Okay, so where does Freemasonry fit into Satanism?
I would say it doesn't directly. It indirectly does, because at higher levels, I would say there is a very bad degradation of Freemasonry, and the lodge system is fallen and corrupt, and it would definitely feed into Satanism at the highest levels of Freemasonry that have gone rogue and corrupt and clandestine in their understanding of esoteric Freemasonry. Freemasonry itself is not something that should be completely shunned and say, oh, this is evil. No, it is not. It is an occult tradition like Kabbalah, like Tarot, like Rosicrucianism, like many other ancient traditions, theosophy, etc., that is there to teach natural law and to teach morality, but it has horribly fallen because the occultists knew they had to infiltrate it and degrade it and water it down and get people to use it in ways that it was never intended to be used if they were going to control it, and ultimately to control the knowledge of natural law from reaching people, in a huge way. That's the last thing they want.
Let's go to
Wow.
the next question.
My study is the I Ching, which relate. I think that's your turn, or
Yeah, I'll go for it. What's the connection between Black Sun and Saturn?
I'd say there's a pretty direct connection because the Saturnian cult was part of a stellar cult, and when that, that's even older, some would say, than the dark solar cult that is now what I would say is this cult that rules the world. And Saturn is considered possibly a failed dwarf star, failed brown dwarf star, even in modern cosmology and astronomy. Researchers might consider Saturn a potential proto brown dwarf. And so they considered that potentially a star that just simply did not ignite. But if you look at it in the sense of the energies and the chakra system of the entire solar system, Saturn is the root chakra, or the Malkuth center, if we look at it on the rungs of the Kabbalistic tree of life. And it is considered the disciplinarian and the one that will act as the one that is the attractor for the involutionary force, not the evolutionary force. It kind of holds us grounded and rooted and in earthbound identified consciousness, which is exactly what this cult wants us to be. So they identify with Saturn as the black sun.
All right.
But
Next
yet
question.
there's that Saturn moon matrix and the artificial component, which seems to be taking. It seems to be that's where the distortion is. Whereas if that was not on Saturn, it rules the law of structure and the root system for the tree of life, and recovering the tree of life out of like learning knowledge based on the tree of knowledge, like self-knowledge, right?
And you know what? That it doesn't have to be that dark negative influence. Saturn is grounding. It's grounding. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
All right.
it's been distorted into just being used for chaotic purposes and total control purposes. But it is there to keep our feet on the ground and get us to do our work where we need to do it, right here and here and now.
For Saturn.
Yeah.
Yes. So, Mark,
the next question.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, well, they just skipped the question. So what?
I think
someone asked me.
This one.
Yeah, we took this one, but the next question, Alex, you have to skip over. But I believe they were asking, what is Loosh?
Loosh?
Oh, good memory.
Lux, Lux. It's
no, Loosh. What is Loosh?
I've never heard the term. I don't know.
Oh no, like the reptilian feeding on the Loosh, creating like trauma, and then it feeds on it.
Okay, I'm not familiar. I mean, I think these beings definitely feed on etheric energy.
Just probably use a better word and the original word and a different word, because we've been talking about it all night.
Okay.
It's when all these like psychological operations take place and create trigger events, and it brings up anxieties and fears, and then.
Is this a relatively new phrase? Is this a relatively new, nomenclature for giving that concept, or has this been around for a while? Because I've never heard it.
It doesn't even matter. Let's move on to the next question. Because
what is the ultimate goal they strive for in Satanism? Do they worship anything?
Okay,
Miranda
so
Anderson.
Great questions. Yes, they. I got out and developed the conscience to leave this because I had previously thought that their goal was just to sort of understand how psychology works, deep psychology. That's how you have to look at the occult, folks. You have to look at the occult as deep ancient psychology. It's knowledge about how human beings really work on the inside and in their mind. And then, dark occultism is taking that knowledge and manipulating others with it. Like a master psychologist could manipulate somebody that knows nothing about what's going on within themselves.
Ring of Power from Lord of the Rings. Sorry.
That's right. It's exactly like that, And, when I realized their goal wasn't just to do that at an individual level so that they could have like an advantage over their fellow human beings in their personal life. That's what drew me to it. I was an ego and I wanted to have an advantage over my fellow human being in my life by knowing things that they didn't know. And I knew knowledge could be converted into power even when I was young. Okay. So that was why I went into this in my ego. Plus, having perceived religion as a trap and a control system, I wanted to just fly into the arms of the opposite. And believe me, that's why they set these dialectics up between religion, New Age, Satanism. They want everybody just running into their arms and giving them two opposing dynamics that they could run into, but never never understanding natural law or the truth, real morality, never. That's the last thing they want anybody looking at. So their goal is to keep people away from the understanding of natural law. And in doing so, by doing that, by making people not understand natural law, all of the power aggregates to them, and they will eventually become masters of everyone else and gods on earth, where their rule will not be able to be challenged because of they will create a technocracy by which people will not be able to come out of their trap and their enslavement. They will not be able to physically do it at some point. We're still at the point where we have this technology available to us. We can communicate this knowledge to the world. And here in America, we're still heavily armed. So, and that could have to play into it. It did back in 1775 and 6, and it may have to again. And I think that option should never be taken off the table in the 3D space. And
right,
I won't.
We're going to take one more question, and then we're going to close up the show, and we appreciate you being here,
Sure.
But let's go with one more question.
Sure.
What positive actions and solutions can we take at this time? What are you doing to prepare for what lies ahead? Sorry, Laura, I know that was your question. Sorry.
Well, I was muted, so thanks for taking it over.
All right, what positive actions and solutions can we take at this time, and what are you doing to prepare for what lies ahead?
Sure. So, I think the number one thing that people can do is, first of all, understand what is really going on behind the movie version of events, as someone like David Icke refers to it. This whole crap show that the mainstream media is telling us is reality. And understand there's something far deeper than even politics. There's something far deeper than even financial machinations. Okay, we have to understand that this goes even deeper than what we call the deep state politically. Okay, it goes into the realm of the occult world, and this is what people are just on the verge, tiny little sliver of people beginning to wake up to. When I was deeply ensconced in this, 20, 25 years ago, and teaching it for the last 15 years. Okay. We have to understand that the rulers of the world are not bankers. They are not politicians. They are not even think tank members in, multinational companies and political think tanks. They are a priest class of an ancient cult that has ruled the world for millennia. For millennia. They are the ancient dark orders of Atlantis and pre-Diluvian times. Okay? They have been ruling this
planet. Hello, right? Aleister Crowley and sorry, keep going.
That would be something that's a very tricky topic to get into because it's quite an enigma.
Crowley and Forget I said it. Yeah. Just keep going with your flow. I did not mean to just jump in like that.
But this priest class is something we have to understand. We have to know their mentality, total egotism, moral relativism, social Darwinism, and eugenics, which were the last tenets. Okay. We have to understand they want to become the gods of the world. That's their ultimate goal. Satan isn't something that they worship. It's an archetype that they embody in their own lives. That's what Satan is to them.
That leads me to this question then. So what is 666? Is 666 the symbol of man?
Absolutely it is. It is the representation of where man's consciousness is at this point in Earth's history, which is fallen consciousness. 666 represents fallen consciousness. 777 represents raised consciousness. 888 represents God consciousness, and 999 represents cosmic completion of evolution.
God. Every password that I have for the last 10 years has 999 at the end. It's
one of the numbers of cosmic completion because it's the inversion of 666. It's turning it upside down.
It's so crazy. It's like I always have to have 999 when I do a password.
The biblical passage in Revelation does not say that it is the number of a man. Mistranslation. It says it is the number of man, meaning mankind, meaning humanity. It is the occultic numerological representation of humanity's fallen consciousness.
Isn't it crazy though that mankind has the word kind in it? Like we need to be kind
Should
to
be.
each other, right?
Right.
I mean,
And understanding what cosmic
it's like
what cosmic love is. You know, what true thelema is cosmic love. It is not just brotherly love. It's not romantic love, and it's not even love between just a human being loving everyone. That's a higher form of love, but which was called, you had eros, philos, and then thelema, or
you're talking about
agape. Agape, I should say, not thelema. But, agape is cosmic love. That's the love of truth. That's the love of what's right. That's the love of principle, not the love of the flesh. Not, you could say eros was romantic love between romantic partners. That's one form of love. Philos is the love of brother and sister, and that extends to everywhere. That's the love of humanity, physically.
Mark,
of
thank
every
you.
person.
I just want to say we're out of time. And gosh, man, wow, that was a serious.
There's so much to go into.
This was
Okay,
just.
so
We got to
David,
have you back on the show again.
Yeah, anytime you want, we can go deeper into it.
Like at one of those after parties, like let's keep going, and I can go, and I hope you guys appreciate like the fact that I want to do this again, and that if I didn't do the best job as a host, that you guys will give me another chance. And I've just really enjoyed talking to you, Mark. You're like...
Not at all. You guys were both awesome. And, anytime that you want to go any deeper into it, I'd be honored to come back. No problem at all. And for those who want to look deeper into my work, just check my website out. There's tons and tons and tons of material up there, all for free. whatonearthishappening.com. You can learn about my whole journey, learn about natural law, share it all with anyone you want. It's all up there for free. So check it out.
And I would like to remind everybody to please go on our Patreon. Alex, if you could put that on, please subscribe. We give question and answer shows and a biweekly newsletter. And Laura, do you want to close out the show and say any last statements?
Oh, well, last statements is I love you guys, and Mark, man, you're just like soul brother, and your journey is so inspiring. And same with you, David. I'm so grateful you're doing this show with us. I want to give a shout out to Alex. Thank you for helping us with so many things about this show. And yeah, everybody, thanks for tuning in. And the Patreon thing, man, it's very interactive. I'm a professional astrologer, and I go into the medical, and I go into, not predictive astrology. I like to do tune-ups and help you understand where you might still be locked into stuff that doesn't serve you. And, man, I'm honored to be in the space with like people that I consider to be huge lights to shine the way. So thanks, both of you and everybody. So darktolightshow.com. Alex has been pretty much,
he's been on top of it.
But yeah, man, Mark, I'd love to have you back. And I know you just went through a loss. And my heart is with you. I lost the father of my kids. He died.
Sorry to hear that.
It's
hard.
So anybody out there that's dealing with that kind of stuff, we're people that have been through some horrible tragedies, and David too. And he's very transparent. And I love you guys. And that's it.
Thank you guys both for doing the great work that you're doing. Keep it up. You guys are awesome, and I really appreciate your invite. And anytime you want to do it again, just let me know.
We'll have a part 2 for sure. All right, everybody, join us again. Not this coming Wednesday, but the next Wednesday. We're doing it every other Wednesday. Thank you.